So I'm in front of this beautiful stone building at UBC Vancouver, Iona building, aka Castle. Now this building has been a home of Vancouver School of Theology for many years. Now they have moved to different building. Now this is the home of the Vancouver School of Economics since 2015. Now my walk today will be short walk. It'll be a short walk in the distance, but long in meditation. I will share my reflection while I'm walking a labyrinth. Now let me show you a labyrinth right here. So I don't know if you knew that there is a labyrinth here around this area. Now this labyrinth was constructed in 2006 on the original labyrinth that was set on the grass in 1997. This labyrinth on its pattern and design resembles the pattern of the stone labyrinth and the floor of Sept Cathedral in France. Now as you can see that this labyrinth, like all other labyrinths, had circular pattern design, a symbol of unity and wholeness. Since the ancient times, people have walked a labyrinth to reflect, to meditate and prayer, and to open themselves to a divine presence within. Walking a labyrinth brings a sense of calmness and clarity and peace of mind. And we need that, especially in times like now. Sometimes people think that a labyrinth is same as a maze. Now they might look similar, but they are not the same. A labyrinth has a single winding path. Pattern, the single winding path that leads from the entrance to the center in a single lane, one way in and out, has a universal. There is only one way in and out from the entrance and to the center, from the center to the entrance. On the other hand, a maze is a multi-course. It has many courses and paths, and then sometimes you can get confused and you can lost in the path and not able to find the place that often leads you to a dead end. Maze is more like a game of puzzles. Walking a labyrinth brings us this sense of calmness and clarity. It leads us into a deep meditation. It's a form of a prayer. In times like this, we feel like we are walking in a maze, confused and chaotic and sometimes lost. There are many threatening and confusing warnings and noises coming from every direction, threatening to pull us apart and fragmenting us to many different places and paralyzing us. There are many opinions and reactions, accusations and blamings and judging happening all around us, and it feels us that we are on the edge, feel unease and fear. And we feel like we are walking in a tangled web, walking and lost in a maze. So in times like this, we need to walk a single path, quiet all the noises, and enter into our inner labyrinth and walk our inner labyrinth and meet the divine presence within us to calm our mind, to collect our thoughts and refresh our soul in this time of Corona. Now today's our Bible text is coming from the book of Romans chapter 14. It's the letter that Apostle Paul is writing to Christians and churches in the city of Rome in the first century. And in this letter, Apostle Paul is a bit harsh on Christians and churches. He's rebuking and admonishing and all these Christians for how they were treating one another. there were a lot of bullying, a lot of blaming, arguing, and bickering happening among the Christians in that city. And Apostle Paul wants to set things straight. He says, stop all this bickering, stop blaming, and stop bullying and judging one another, and focus on what really matters, that you need to walk that single path. So what's happening? What were the main issues? What were they bickering about? What were they arguing about? Well, they were arguing about what to drink, what to eat, and how and when to celebrate Sabbath and certain holy days. Now you need to understand that in Roman churches, they were made up of both Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, people from Jewish background with their Jewish religious and historical background, and people were coming from Roman and Greek cultural and historical background, and they made up the Roman Christians and Roman churches. And the people from Jewish side, they had a certain Jewish dietary laws, and they really observed that as closely as possible. And they were not eating any pork, they were not eating any shellfish, and they were not eating any of the meats and foods that were bought in the marketplaces, because they would not know if they were being offered to the idols. So for those Jewish Christians, it was very important for them to follow the Jewish tradition of their dietary laws and observing as much as possible. On the other hand, Christians from their cultural background is not Jewish. They didn't think that was important, so they looked down on them and says, you are weak, you are still immature. And the other major conflict was about how to celebrate certain festive days. Should Christians celebrate and observe national patriotic days of Rome, since and that would be kind of disloyal to their new king Jesus? So the other conflict was based on how to celebrate Sabbath. Should we celebrate Sabbath on Saturday or Sunday, because Sunday was the Lord's day? So amongst themselves, they were arguing and bickering and blaming and judging one another over these matters. And upon hearing all this, Apostle Paul was very direct and very simple. He says, stop this nonsense. You are blaming and judging one another over minor matters. And all of your effort, all the infighting arguments are really diverting you. Your energy and your effort, that should be about sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Stop arguing, stop bickering over this, accept one another's diversity, and focus on what really matters. If there are those who will just be a vegetarian, let them be a vegetarian. If there are others who want to eat meat bought from the marketplace, let them eat. If there are those who want to celebrate Sabbath on Saturday, let them celebrate on Saturday, or Sunday, let them celebrate on Sunday. Let's not argue about all these small minor matters, but focus on what really matters to all of us, not on the issue of the moment, and stop bickering over each other. Now, I come from Korean church background, and many Korean churches, they have drinking issue. That is, they have a strong restrictions and prohibition against drinking alcohols like beer or wine or any strong alcoholic beverage like whiskey or scotch or soju, which is Korean version of vodka. They do not like to have their church members to drink alcoholic beverage. If they do, they look down upon them. They consider those who drink alcohols as immature in their faith and judge, and they would not consider them to be a good candidate to be working or serving in the church in important roles like elders and deacons and Sunday school teachers or choir members. They would be considered to be outside of the circle. So the good Christians should not drink alcoholic beverage, and of course, definitely ministers should never drink alcoholic beverage or even seen near the people who are drinking alcoholic beverages or seen in liquors nearby the liquor store at all. Now, for me, I like to drink alcoholic beverage. I like to drink beer or wine and scotch. Of course, not all at the same time and not too much. And when friends come along and we want to go out, I want to take them to brewery or just have a glass of beer or sometimes a glass of wine. I like to drink alcoholic beverage and a social drinker. Now, if I were to be in Korea, or if I were to minister any of Korean churches in Vancouver, and if people and my church people find out that I like to drink alcoholic beverage, that they see me drinking any wine or beer, people would label me as rebel, and just there's a stigma, and they will just push me aside, and they will consider me as weak in my faith. And they would stigmatize me as unbecoming of a minister. So a long time ago when I became a minister, I decided to sell myself, and I said that I would not minister at Korean church because I probably would not last too long. So Apostle Paul is repeatedly admonishing Christians and churches in Rome to stop looking down on their brothers and sisters for that they are not like them in their conviction, in their beliefs, in their actions. That you should not judge others just because they do not share your beliefs and your convictions and your lifestyle. Just learn to accept one another. Learn to accept your diversity. The people who are different than you, learn to accept them. Focus on what really matters, not on the issue at the moment. Now, what Paul is admonishing to Roman churches and Christians also apply to all of us in a broader context in the world that we live in. Ultimately, we need to take ownership of our lives and to be responsible for our every action, big or small. And this requires us to stop making judgment and look down on the others. We need to stop worrying about other people, but taking our personal accountability seriously to what really matters. So what does really matter? What is priority? What should we be ultimately be accountable for? Well, basically, we are accountable for the well-being of others. We are accountable for the well-being of our family members, our community members, our church members, for the people in our world, in God's creation. We are accountable for the well-being of others. And what we do and say every day impact the well-being of those around us, near and far. This means in times like this, we need to make sure that keep our social distance and to wash our hands and wear our mask and follow the protocols and guidelines that is required for the well-being and safety of others as well as ours. As citizens living in our community and our country, we are responsible to follow the simple rules like that in times like this. Now I hear that many younger children, like in a kindergarten or elementary school, they follow the guidelines and protocols really well. They're very responsible to wash their hands and wear their mask and social distancing in classrooms. They're very good at it. They're very responsible for their actions, for the well-being of themselves, but for the others. And that's great. But on the other hand, I hear that many adults in social gathering and in groups and even in church, they do not follow these simple rules, these protocols and these guidelines. Often they just put it aside because they want to do whatever they want to do. In the process, they infect, they jeopardize the health and safety of others, those around them. I think we have a lot to learn from our young children in this case. Now, I like what Dr. Bonnie Henry says every time she comes out for briefing. At the end of briefing, she says, be kind to each other. Be kind to each other. Now, that's the same value that Jesus tried to instill to his disciples, to all of us, in the spirit of Jesus. It's like love your neighbors as yourself. Be kind to one another. When the fear and uncertainty tend to pull us away from the other neighbors, we need to remind ourselves to be kind to others by reaching out and trying to find out what they really need. And when we feel like we are anxious and we are unsettled and we want to just throw ourselves away from the need and blind us to hear and see the Christ and need of those around us, we need to remind ourselves to be kind to others by reaching out. When we feel like blaming and judging and accusing all the other people for what's happening right now, we need to hear the call of Jesus to love our neighbors as much as possible. Love our neighbors as yourselves. Times like this, we need to rise above the occasion. Stop judging and blaming others, but taking ownership of our own actions and be accountable for the well-being of those around us. Now, I've spoken about climate change crisis in the past, but I think that is the most pressing and urgent issue that we need to address right now. What really matters at this point. I know there are other issues that are quite important, like racial justice issues, that I think we really need to focus on that as well. And that's important in light of what's happening around us. But I think, but you know what? It doesn't really matter whether you're white or black, or yellow or brown, whether you are heterosexual or homosexual, transgender or whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you're Republican or Democratic or conservative or liberal. It doesn't really matter whether you are Christian or non-Christian or just non-religious or Muslim. It doesn't really matter. When the climate crisis reaches a tipping point, when the seawater level rises, we will all be under the water, under the sea. It doesn't matter who you are, how different you are from the others, we will all be under the water the same. Our actions today have a dire consequences for our next generations. We are accountable for the well-being of not only ourselves, but for our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren. So today I want to encourage you to take a walk, to walk your inner labyrinth in this time of Corona.